time now for this week's Health Matters. There it is. I was hoping we'd get the rooster. He's been going off for a while now. Paul Critz with you, along with physician assistant Lynn Szabo, host of Health Matters. And this week's show, something near and dear to my heart. My heart. So what's last week I shared some results of recent blood work and first blood work, as an aging male, first blood work I'd had in a long time. And just sort of shared some results that were surprising to me, and we were gonna sort of we're going to share some of these insights, and maybe it'll be applicable to listeners out there who are sharing the same sorts of problems. But really, for me, this is just to help me personally with this episode.
That's just me taking pity on you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
House call.
I try not to lean on that privilege and that access that I have to, firsthand, like actual knowledge. But in this case, we can fold it into how Health Matters works.
We don't really have your numbers directly. That was the original thought.
I could not work into my chart.
It got me thinking about this cardiovascular health risk assessment tool showed up kind of over, I think, the last 10 years or maybe 15. And it's a cool little tool, and I don't think patients ever really hear about it. You're supposed to do it on everybody on a yearly basis when they get their cholesterol checked, but I don't, and I think it gets done, but it's also just another box to tick and never really gets discussed with patients.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you should ask about it.
And this is, I mean, this isn't like a web-based something that people can just access their own selves. Can you really? Okay.
You can but you have to have some specialized information, like probably your blood tests in front of you and what your last blood pressure was, et cetera. So this tool is endorsed by the American College of Cardiologists and the American Heart Association. So if you want to Google it, just go to the ACC cardiovascular risk assessment tool and it'll show up. So what it does, despite what this paragraph says, is it looks at the risk of for a person who has never had a heart attack or a stroke and what their next 10 years might look like. Okay. So you're supposed to use it before anybody's had a heart attack, and it's going to talk about your risk of non-fatal heart attack and then fatal or non-fatal stroke. Okay. So hopefully in the non-fatal risk, if somebody goes on to have that, then if they know the risk is higher than Joe average, then they can modify their risk factors if it's possible. It was created for people age 40 to 49 who have not had a previous MI, and it was created by looking at data from white Americans and African Americans. So it might underestimate the risk of Native Americans, and it might overestimate risk of Asian Americans and Mexican Americans.
This is interesting. So it seems on the IT side like this is something that could change here, or if it hasn't changed or is changing already, as AI gets folded into some of these things and learns from a growing base of subjects.
And then you have to verify it because AI doesn't know everything in the world.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
It has to be verifiable data.
Yeah.
And then one of the things is that you can, once you get an idea of what your risk is over the next 10 years, so it's reported out in percentages, then you can look at some of the questions they ask and look what modifiable risk factors you have and what non-modifiable risk factors. Like, for example, I can tell you have the risk factor being male. You can't change that for the purpose of this tool. So, but you have changed a risk factor that you have smoking. Although my understanding is you're still doing nicotine gum. So then that gets kind of curious, like nicotine, what? Because that affects your heart, that affects your vascular health. So if you're not smoking, you can truthfully say that, but I would plug in yes for you, even though you've taken some great steps forward. It also looks at your blood pressure, your race, your sex, your age, and whether or not you have diabetes. Mm-hmm. So the blood pressure number that it uses is your systolic blood pressure, which is AKA the top number.
Okay.
Okay, diastolic being the lower number. So it looks at the top number. And then it divides your risk. It takes about 2 seconds to hit all these buttons.
Oh, yeah, sure.
online.
Yeah.
If you have the data in front of you. And it gives you a percentage value that divides your risk into categories. So low is less than 5%. And I've seen people whose risk is like 0.2%. So yeah, I want that cholesterol. Anyway, borderline is 5 to 7.4%. So I think you said your risk was 8, so you were just like one toke over the line.
Right over the
Your intermediate risk is 7.5 to 19.9%.
Wow.
So that's a pretty, I would say, from doing like hundreds of these since I started at UHS, almost everybody falls between 7.5 and 10.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then high is greater than 20, and I have only seen a couple people that are greater than 20.
Wow.
And what's super cool is if you use this tool in the exam room with the patient with their present day blood pressure, their up-to-date cholesterol values, and it looks at it looks at good cholesterol. Mm-hmm. And it looks at your triglycerides. Mm-hmm. Okay, triglycerides are kind of the building blocks of blood sugar, glucose.
Okay.
And so if you can sit in there and you can say, hey, look, if you quit smoking, your risk would go down from 14.5 to 6.
Right.
I mean, it's that dramatic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool. And it's kind of like meaningful data in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that it's ever inspired anybody to quit, but it's inspired people to think about it. So
okay, so how it was presented to me was, and we didn't play any of the, oh, hey, let's change this, let's do this. We didn't do any of that. It was presented, she was the person, the PA I was dealing with, and it was a telehealth thing.
Right.
So she's sitting on her screen, and I'm sitting there in the room, and she goes, oh, let me enter your numbers into this tool, and she tells me about this tool, and click, 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 and it comes out, oh, here's the ticker tape, 8%. You've got an 8%, and that's an 8% chance of a cardiac event in the next 10 years, is all she said.
Yeah.
But those were her words. That's how it was presented to me then. And I forget if we'd asked, because she even asked, like, do because then she used that. We went right into, then this is a time to talk about a statin.
Right.
To talk about the medication. And I'm going, no, this isn't the time to talk about that, because when you say 8%, because I start doing all these things, I'm hearing, hey, I'm 92% good. So what about, and I was talking with her then about, these lifestyle changes that were sort of already happening in my household because of my wife and her health concerns. And it was such a surprise to me, the cholesterol, because I eat right. I eat correctly.
Right.
And so I didn't understand. There's some history in my mom's side of my family for the cholesterol. Just on my father's side, there's some history for the pre-diabetic and diabetic conditions. And so I'm just, what's going on? So I said, well, how about instead of signing me up to be, to pay into the pharmacological, paradigm for the rest of my life, how about I try, leaning into these, lose the weight that I know I should lose. And according to BMI, I was like 10 pounds overweight. So let's start there. And, some other things I can do. And so she said, yeah, we'll come back in like 3-4 months and do the blood work again. And so I came back, and then we started in, it's been 2.5 weeks now. But so it wasn't ever like, and I can't remember, and this is something that I think does need to be clarified. I can't remember if she asked me if I used nicotine or if I smoked. I can't remember what the question was. My answer was, we quit smoking like, 5, 6, or 7 months ago is what it had been then. And so that was fine. So I may have inadvertently misrepresented that then, if I should have said, yeah, but I chew nicotine gum, a couple, 4 pieces of nicotine gum a day instead of a half a pack of cigarettes. So equation. I don't know. I don't know how best that she should have dealt with that.
It's not perfect. I think if I was sitting in the room with you, I would have said, well, let's press the yes button and let's press the no button.
Yeah.
And look at it, from that point of view. But I think nicotine's nicotine. That's kind of my worldview.
Okay.
But you're right. There's some refinements that could happen in this.
Well, I know I am prone to see more in a situation like this just because of who I am and how I think and what I believe. But I felt like the first stop was, let's get you on a statin. Hey, everybody's doing it. And I guess I didn't appreciate that, especially at 8%.
I don't think I would have put you on a statin. I think I would have, my first stop is modifiable risk factors.
Okay.
Because this tool is primed to show you that. What if you lost a little bit of weight? How would that look? What if your blood pressure went down? You went on the DASH diet, so dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and you lowered your systolic blood pressure. Oh, look, that looks a lot better. And I will say that my personal experience with it, so my value was about 10%. And I did go on a statin and it went down to 9%. And I was like super unimpressed with that. I might be talking to my PA about that. But statins there's other good reasons for me to be on it that are not applicable to you.
Okay.
So this is to a certain degree really personalized. And that's what's so cool about it is you can say, okay, we'll change this. Okay, the numbers go down or go up. And
I don't mean to cast any aspersions on the quality of care I was offered, but I didn't experience it being used as a tool in that regard.
Okay, well that's I call people in and they're annoyed that I can't just tell them over the phone, but really it's an in-depth conversation. And if you as a provider have an expectation that somebody is going to use this information in the most useful way possible, then you have to have that conversation. It has to be face-to-face in my experience, because I whip my phone out, and I tell them I'm going to step into the medical library so they don't think I'm going to Facebook or something. And then I say, well, here's your numbers. This is what it looks like. So what if we changed this?
Yeah.
Oh, we should change this.
That is...
There's no little toggle button on there for statin, no statin.
Okay.
It's not one of the things you consider.
Interesting.
It does ask you whether you're on a blood pressure medicine. And for me, that's kind of a conundrum, because I am on a blood pressure medicine to prevent getting migraines. It works really, really well for me. I'm on a tiny dose. But if my argument is if you're chewing nicotine gum and that means that still counts as a yes, then maybe does my being on a blood pressure medicine, even though I don't have hypertension, does that count as a yes?
Right.
See, there's like the super gray zones.
Yeah.
But you can toggle it either way, get an instantaneous number, and maybe look at a range instead of a specific value. Maybe that's the most helpful way to look at it.
And just to see in real time, like a statistical representation of preventative health care. You go in and you have an exam, you have something you need to address, you talk with the doctor, we'll do this, we'll test down the road, but let's give this a shot. It seems like an easier visualization process for those changes, those lifestyle changes. If you can go, oh, well, it can be quantified, at least by this tool, with this certain percentage, it will change this much. And I can see that's something then, wow, we're talking 5% gets me down into a safe range. That I can kind of put more of my will behind that, because I'm not just shooting in the dark, right? I have a very specific goal to go for.
Right. And the other thing that I find kind of confusing about this tool is there are a lot of people in the world of mixed race ancestry.
Right.
And so what if one of your grandmothers was Native American? Does that mean you are? At least for the purposes of cholesterol.
Did your grandparents come from a blue zone? That kind of thing, right?
Does it change if it's your grandfather because, the male gender is a risk factor, or
right.
male sex is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease? It's you could just lose your mind.
Sure.
Split hairs.
And that's why I had one of my rare sort of like hopeful comments about AI in that regard. That is, if this were something, it sounded like the process up to this date, up to this point in technological history, has been, let's get all the data we can to build this tool. Once the tool is built, it's in the box, and the data doesn't go back into it unless we, there are patches and new versions of things that come out. But if there's something that is like AI in real time, as data sets are entered into this app, that it would then adjust those calculations
and
on the
then
back end accordingly.
the next step in science, so you've made the hypothesis, is then to get data, test your hypothesis, throw it in there, do a longitudinal study and see if it's real.
Yeah.
Do really 8% of people go on to have an MI or a stroke?
Yeah.
And it's your choice was non-fatal first MI or fatal or non-fatal stroke.
Okay.
So that seems a little unrefined too.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they chose that.
Well,
But
it's certainly it's a helpful step in the right direction if used.
Yeah.
I think I would much prefer to have the experience. It seems that you described, that you take.
Well,
your
I
patients
would
through.
go on. So let's say somebody's number, let's say yours is 8. And so that's slightly in the intermediate range. Okay. You have some modifiable risk factors. We've looked at those, and some non-modifiable risk factors. So what do? You get more data. So an increased risk value might trigger other testing. So this is the next step with you. So highly sensitive C-reactive protein, which is an indicator of inflammatory processes going on. And the usual C-reactive protein is kind of like in the body inflammatory, and then highly sensitive, my guess is it breaks down to what affects the heart. Okay, or the cardiovascular system. A lipid panel, this one I don't understand, because that's your cholesterol values. In order to do the tool, you have to have done that already. That data.
That's a number that.
So I don't know, maybe a repeat one eventually.
Is there a more refined lipid panel?
Yeah, a lipid panel tells us about total cholesterol, and we'd like to see that below 200. High density cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol, we'd like to see that above like 34. And then low density, and we'd like to see below 100. And then triglycerides. And then it looks at something called very low density, and I have to say, I've never seen it used clinically, so why is it even in the panel? But anyway, you can have somebody with really high total cholesterol, let's say a total cholesterol of 250, and they've got like almost 100, a value of 100 of the good stuff, so that's why their total is up, and they've got a really less than 100 of the bad stuff. And then their triglycerides are kind of, normal, let's say. So that's somebody technically with high cholesterol.
But it's not as bad as...
But it's really good high cholesterol. And so their risk in a tool like this is, how do you represent that? Because it asks for the HDL and asks for a triglyceride. So... I don't know. That's a refinement that maybe AI can tell me about.
So I was told, the number I was given was 180 something.
For your total cholesterol.
I don't know if it was total or if it was the low density. I thought she said that we'd like to see that under 100. So I think it was the low density one. So
right.
So, but that's the only number I had access to. And if I could work the MyChart sign up process, I could probably see those other numbers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I don't know what the total cholesterol was then.
Right, and I might see somebody who's got great cholesterol, but their triglycerides are high, and that implies that they're either diabetic in the moment or they're leaning toward it.
Okay.
And so that's still bad. You can have good cholesterol and still have evidence of disease in there. So other things that a higher value that your 8% might have triggered is an EKG or an exercise stress test. And I don't think that either of those, the EKG could be done without symptoms. I'm assuming that the patient is asymptomatic for heart disease. And an exercise stress test, I don't think what we have here, I don't even know if they do it here. Maybe Dr. Blundell does, but I don't think they would do that on an asymptomatic patient because of a high value from this tool, especially in 8, when that's, barely intermediate. So maybe in a more medically resourced rich community. They might have, maybe the head of Google gets stuff like that done. I don't know. But if you take that value and you don't jump to statins, but you ask for further, more refined testing so that you get a better idea of what's going on, and then you can make the statin decision or not. Statins are generic right now, and I guess you could argue nobody's really making money off of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're not the evil drugs. There's a whole side, interesting diversion. There's a whole private hallway conversations that healthcare providers have about longevity drugs. Statin is a topic there. It's considered, I don't think we know completely what it does to people, but it's kind of considered a longevity drug.
A longevity drug, what's that term mean?
That means that, kind of like the blue zone of big pharma, and, not stuff that a patient could necessarily change about their life. But there are doctors that will take some pills and maybe even some vitamins because they think it will prolong their health. Mm-hmm. And they don't really have the data to support that.
And statins are like that?
Yeah,
are seen like that?
Statins are discussed.
Huh.
I'm only on 10 milligrams, which is kind of a low dose, but I didn't see that it changed anything. So, I'm going to update my lab work and we'll see.
Okay, so then if it does turn out I have to go on statins, then I won't be
It's not the bad drug that everybody talks about. Mm-hmm. Providers see it as a really promising drug for maybe even more uses than what we use it for now. Okay. It is generic, although there's versions of it that are probably brand only. So Big Pharma already made its money off of it. Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're making it a little morally more acceptable if that is something that I have to go. Right. And people go online and they listen to what they what agrees with their pre-existing worldview, and they use that as evidence to support.
Yeah, no, I don't have any evidence about or any judgment about that. It's not even that factually based. I just look at it as, I have to go on this drug for the rest of my life. I screwed up somehow. That's what I look at it. I look at it like, I've failed myself by having to do this.
I don't think that's true. I think the rest of your life isn't true. And I think you can say to your provider, I'm like going with the conservative things that I can do first, and then then the conversation doesn't end. Then there's a timetable to revisit it. So I would say for that 6 months probably.
And that is exactly how we left it. Actually, is here go lose 20 pounds and refine your diet a little bit. Although there wasn't much I needed to change. Right. Now there are some. I do have questions about the things that I am doing then to address these sorts of concerns. And one is big question because the cholesterol number was such a surprise to me because, like I was saying, I mean, basically chicken and fish, and that's like it. As far as the meat goes, we never would do anything else. I have a hard time eating things that I can envision playing or petting with. And babies. I know people will tell me chickens are very wonderful creatures. I don't see it myself, so I'm okay eating them. So the cholesterol was like a big surprise, but a lot of my protein then had come from eggs. Because if I'm not eating as much meat, I wanted to turn toward that. So I was thinking, then the cholesterol thing. And I grew up when I was a kid, all of a sudden eggs were horrible for you and they were going to kill you. And it stayed that way for like 20 years. Right. And then I seem to remember kind of a change come.
Eggs are okay.
See, tell me about that. What's up with eggs?
Well, just because something has a lot of cholesterol in it doesn't mean that it's bad cholesterol. Mm-hmm. Again, we've talked about how there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So anything in moderation. So if we can start from there, I don't think there's any problem with eating eggs.
Wow. Okay.
I suspect you have a genetic issue. Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell without looking at your numbers, but there you go.
I don't have high cholesterol. I am high cholesterol is what you're saying.
I would not necessarily cut out a bunch of eggs and expect to change.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was trying to understand.
I would have your provider ask or, get the information to your provider that here's my family history.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And,
okay.
Just because somebody hasn't had a stroke or an MI yet, if they're on a statin, mention it.
Generation above me to a person on my mom's side are all on statins and have had like epically high cholesterol just out of the blue. But, have not had, they got boomer diets. They grew up in a different world. And so what I learned.
It's not always diet, though. See,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just tripped yourself up. In my opinion, it's genetics.
No,
I've seen
that's-
people with really high cholesterol, and because they have a lot of good cholesterol, that's why their numbers are air quotes high. But it's the good stuff, and so what it's doing inside the blood vessels is different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I did find out about how I was eating, I would eat smart. I would eat as whole grains. I would, as high protein when I could, when I would mindfully eat, I thought. And then I started looking at portions and realized that my healthy breakfast, which is peanut butter with no sugar added, like as close to just chewed up peanuts as possible, peanut butter, cereal, and blueberries with oat milk. It's a wonderful breakfast. It was like 3 times the recommended size of the serving size on the packages. And that's what I was going with on the packages. And I went, oh, okay. Maybe I'm eating pretty good. And I'm just eating a whole bunch of it. I'm more like 3 times as much as
I think I would agree with that, but I think there's something you're overlooking. So what you told me about your encounter with your provider is you sat down, your blood pressure was high, they rechecked it, it was normalized. And I think that people call that white coat hypertension because then it's benign, right? I don't think it's benign.
That's not. We have a machine here, and Lisa checks it all the time.
Okay,
and I'm
but
super low.
I think within what you just described as a breakfast, there's salt. There's hidden salt.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe get the kind of peanut butter that Wild Rivers, you just throw the nuts in and grind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, with no salt in it. So read the label there. Learn how to read labels.
That has become a big
does oat
part,
milk
yeah.
have salt added? I wouldn't be surprised
It wasn't
if
oatmeal.
it did.
It's not oatmeal, but it's So reading.
So
all
the
of
DASH
that.
diet, so dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and normalize your blood pressure all the time. That's the goal, all the time. So, and it would be interesting. So if you did this tool, if she had toggled your 2 blood pressures in there, just changing that one variable, would that have, changed her recommendation?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. The recommendation seemed to be the easy thing, which was, here, get on this drug. It'll help, and the numbers will come down.
Yeah. So how can you improve how can Joe Average improve their situation? So eat a heart-healthy diet, exercise regularly, which you do. I think you do also high-intensity interval training, too.
Occasionally.
We call that hills out here. So when you hike, do you do hills?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you guys did a Boy Scout trail you were talking about. Decrease alcohol, decrease weight. So you have a couple pounds to lose to idealize your body mass index. So trudge onward with that. This is a cool one. Manage stress. I don't know how anybody does this. What do? You do meditation, do yoga?
No. I took a month off. Well, and you can't take a month off. I couldn't because I live here. But I took a month down and refashioned the workflow with the Redwood Voice Youth Media Group and really leaned into the help that I have here and stopped trying to do everything myself. So I have been able to manage stress a little bit and find some other.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I would do it because
my
whole profession is stress.
Right.
Yeah.
From the very look how it begins. Just going through school and getting into the profession, right?
Yeah, even before that, I was a wildland firefighter, so there's
Oh
stress.
my God.
I'm kind of a stress monkey.
Yeah.
Anyways, stop smoking, which you've done. Avoid secondhand smoke, which surprised me as a recommendation. So secondhand smoke is really that bad, and it doesn't go away when you wave your hand. Okay. And then manage your blood pressure, your blood sugar, and your cholesterol levels. So that's what I bring to this. One of the things I bring to this is being diabetic, is I have to watch my sugar, and so that's my personal challenge along with weight.
I didn't think sugar was a deal for me because the only sugar in my mind that I dealt with was the sugar I put in my coffee. And on a bad day, that could be, when I was looking back at it, 4 tablespoons of sugar, which is a butt ton of sugar. But then I also got into added sugars and looking at all the foods, here's the healthiest bread I can buy.
Right.
And each piece has a teaspoon of sugar in it.
Right.
And there's no bread out there. I'm going to have to start making bread if I want bread.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So learn how to read labels. That's the take home there. It's not that hard. And pay attention to what a portion size is, because the whole amount of sugar in something is dependent on what they define as a portion size, not what you define as a portion size.
Right.
Smaller dishes, buy them at the thrift store.
That's a good
tip.
tip.
That really helps.
That's a good tip.
Super duper
Thanksgiving, we're sitting around, my mom and my stepdad and Lisa and I are sitting around, and we're looking at our helpings of turkey, and we're going, is that like about the size of a deck of playing cards?
Yeah.
I said, I don't know. Whose palm are we using here to judge?
Yeah, I know. It's super confusing, but the whole smaller dishes is data driven.
That is. And the biggest thing to take away is I'm not doing this to change these numbers. This is the rest of my life.
Right.
That's another thing, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The rest of your life, which we all hope is long and healthy.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, I think that this episode of Health Matters will help me attain a longer and healthier life. Thank you very much, Lynn.
Sure.
Any insight into next week's Health Matters?
I don't know about next week, but I'm looking to pin down Dr. Raymer again on diabetes.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe after he retires in January.
Sure, I'll talk now. Yeah. All right. Well, we look forward to that. Thanks. Health Matters right here on KFUG. Lynn Szabo, PA. Thank you so very much. Mm-hmm.